Ananta is going to be the biggest release, or at the very least, one of the biggest releases of 2026 or 7, depending on when it releases, for numerous different reasons. Today, I want to just sit down here and discuss one of the aspects of the game that most surprised me and also at the same time appeals to me. So a few days ago, I did a YouTube short titled How Ananta Will Add New Characters Changes Everything. It's already at almost 70,000 views. So evidently people are very interested in the topic, and I figured I would kind of elaborate a little bit more on it along with my thoughts on it. This is going to include my TGS experience, some of the topics that I discussed with the staff members that were at the TGS booth and the showcase. These were Chinese staff members. These were not the Japanese contractors that were hired, kind of like what were hired for the Azure Premilia booth, but it's another story. I'm not going to get into that in this video. I also noticed that there was a TGS developer interview. I have not looked at that yet because I wanted to react to it all on stream, but I was told there were a few specific mentions to the characters specifically, and I'm going to go ahead here and see if that aligns with what I was told. For those of you that were not aware, Mrs. Stix and I were flown out to Tokyo Game Show 2025 to do sponsored showcases for literally so many freaking games. It was unreal. That was arguably the coolest experience of both of our lives. I've covered several different games now that I was sponsored there to do, like Mirasi, like Chaos Zero Nightmare, Chasing Kaleido Rider, Ananta, Neverness, whoever. There's 5 videos so far on our experience with those games, but Ananta specifically, we got to play for multiple different days for multiple different hours. We got to do the entire scripted intro that you saw in the gameplay trailer, but then we also got to do a ton of exploration. This was us just running out in the street, swinging around, attacking old grandmas, beating up people, driving, earning new equipable weapons, engaging in the gym, changing clothes, buying clothes. It was a whole freaking thing. But one thing that we discussed was the characters, the character gacha, the removal of character gacha specifically, and how the characters themselves are going to be integrated into the world. Now, I don't know if this was covered in the interview. I guess I'll go over it once I'm done talking about the topic and going over what we discussed. Now, I can't discuss too much because, again, like, we are under an NDA and there's only so much we can actually reveal, but there were certain things that we were allowed to discuss. Now, the characters, when I asked what kind of game this was ultimately going to be, because a lot of people are like, they're ripping so much from so many games, you know, like the Spider-Man swing, the Sleeping Dogs thing, the Watch Dogs thing, you know, Sifu, like so many, and I asked him, I was like, so out of curiosity, like, what kind of game are you trying to make with Ananta? And they told me they were trying to make an open world sandbox. So this isn't your typical gacha game, and it's not a character gacha game. It's gonna have gacha cosmetics for things like outfits, vehicles, skins, and maybe more down the line. We don't know yet, but there is gacha implemented. They said that the gacha is not going to interfere with the game. They said the gacha is not going to be predatory or pay to win or unfair to players. But what they did say was that they were making a world that isn't focused on the acquisition of characters. Rather, it is a world that is focused on the narrative presentation of the characters. This game is going to have a world setting where characters, including the player character, are the focus. So this is different to games like WoWA, to games like ZZZ, or games like Genshin or Nikke, where a new update is held. And in that update, the character that is the focal point of the update remains the focal point of the update. So there might be a couple different characters that make an appearance, but that character is the story. And then outside of that, the characters get pushed to the side or completely eliminated. And that apparently is not the case. What we're told was that characters are going to have depth, personality, and stories told separately. And now, I don't know if you saw in the gameplay footage, but like in GTA 5, when you swap characters, it kind of like zones out and then zooms back into the character, and the character's doing something. There was at one point, I think it was Taffy, or maybe it was a pink-haired girl. They were like riding on the top of a car and they're like shooting people, and then they arrested the person. Then it kind of just like panned to them and they just kind of like walked over, and that's how you took over control of it. And that is because the characters are going to have a purpose, a personality, and an actual living, breathing life. These characters are going to exist outside of that update. And these characters are essentially going to be integrated not only into the game, but the world and the story overall. So again, I don't know if you played GTA 5, but there are different stories told from the perspective of different characters, like Trevor. Now, at certain points in the story, the characters kind of overlap, right? They reach a point in the story where now they are connected. The things that they are doing are connected. And that is kind of, I'm assuming here, what they were alluding to, since they said they are going to feature stories that are disconnected from the main character, disconnected from the game or the current story being told, but that kind of come together. It's an amalgamation of stories that can coexist at the same time, but be told separately in their own way, with them as a focal point or as the main character, I'm not entirely sure yet, that all at one point intersect. And that right there is an incredible idea. That is a phenomenal way for them to handle characters and to integrate them into the world. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment here to thank all of my incredible patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube channel members who allow for me to continue to do dedicated videos like this every single day. You guys are absolutely phenomenal, and I genuinely cannot thank you all enough for the support. They also said that these characters are not going to be gacha. This is something that is public knowledge, and we're going to be able to acquire them in-game as well. That is genre redefining. Now, that is what we were told at TGS, and I'm gonna go ahead here and take a look at the interview. I'm gonna look at this properly on stream, maybe today, maybe the next couple days, but I see that there are actually a couple different questions specifically pertaining to the characters, so we're gonna look at those. First question: I understand that Ananta does not have what is known as character gacha, which I think is a fairly challenging attempt for a game like this. What was your aim in eliminating the character gacha? They responded with, the game is being developed with a main focus on the player experiencing the life of the character. In reality, you can only experience one life, but in this game, you can always enjoy, or you can enjoy as many different lives as there are characters. In order to allow players to experience the life of a character, we want them to be able to freely choose a character and enjoy a variety of different lives, which kind of leads into what I was saying. Because we actually were in Japan talking to some of the staff members before this interview went live. So yeah, that the living a variety of different lives, that kind of is exactly what we were told with regards to the different perspectives of characters and how they're going to exist in a city outside of what the main character is doing. For this reason, we made it possible to obtain new characters in a way that is not gacha, which is fucking incredible, by the way. In the demo, new question, in the demo version at TGS 2025, you could switch between 3 characters, but will more characters be added in the future? They responded with, that is the plan. We're still considering how we will expand it specifically, but we're thinking of adding more characters to match the jobs that exist in the city. Each character at Ananta has their own story, which again, it leads into what I was told and other creators were told at TGS, that each character is going to have their own story separate from the main character story, and that is so cool. And players will experience different lives depending on the character that they choose, which, like, dude, goddamn, that is cool. Therefore, going forward, we'd like to create characters that will provide players with new experiences, taking into consideration feedback from players. So I'm assuming here, like, we have the cop. I'm assuming maybe there'll be like a chef character, and there'll be like a cook-off or something related to that. Maybe a skydiver, fitness instructor, who knows? Either way, each character is going to have their own unique story and be integrated into the game and into the game's story in completely unique and different ways. That, again, is exactly what we were told. Regarding the characters' stories, new question, by the way, the main focus will be on experiencing life, but as an RPG with battle elements, how will the characters grow and become stronger? They answered with, things like growth and strengthening also differ depending on the character. For example, the demo version of TGS 2025 featured a police character named Richie, whose level increased by completing police-like tasks. That's so cool, though. So, like, as a chef character, the more you cook, the more you'll level. As a fitness instructor, the more you bang the characters in the closet, the higher your level will be. That is sick. In contrast, the delivery person Taffy's level increased by delivering packages. Again, that is so cool. Ways to level characters that aren't just, you know, story or using items or, you know, like what is traditionally done in gacha. That is so cool. And scrolling through, it looks like that's the only thing related to the characters, as far as I'm aware. So that is exactly what I was told, pretty much, with a few, subtle differences and exceptions. But this right here, this how Ananta are going to be handling new characters, it genuinely does change everything, because if they have characters integrated into the story and implemented in a way that kind of expands them as characters and adds so much depth and complexity to them, then other games are going to have to do the same thing, because if they don't, they're kind of going to suck comparatively. I know you think that you just hit the end of the video, and technically, yeah, you have. And I know your first reaction is to close out of it at this juncture, but don't. No, instead, I urge you to take a moment here and click one of the videos on screen that are coming up in just a moment, so you remain up to date with everything going on in the gacha genre. Trust me, you are not going to regret doing so. Stay flaccid.